Alright, so first things first, I want to give a huge thank you to you guys for supporting the last review. Seriously, it means a whole lot, and I never expected it to blow up as much as it did, but it did, and seriously, I really appreciate it. But without further ado, it is time for us to begin our new review of The Legend of Mana, and I am super excited, so let's get this going. Before a month ago, I had no real experience with Legend of Mana. I'd heard certain things about it, such as it foregoing the usual series structure in favor of a choose-your-own-adventure format, but when I was talking to fans about it, I would notice them split on the game. Some people absolutely love it, while I've seen others hate it for deviating the series from what they liked about Secret of Mana and Trials. Now, as you'd expect, I didn't really have much interest in playing this myself because of how split people were, but then I gave the game a try. Now that I've experienced the original Mana trilogy, what does this very odd entry have to contribute to the series? Well, I decided to find out. I was going to get Legend of Mana physically for this review, but it's like $60 for a decent used copy, so I'm going to settle for my digital PS3 copy for this review. Yes, I said PS3 because this game hasn't been re-released on modern platforms at all, which I find a little odd. Guess my Mana collection will have to wait. Now, considering that this game has a whole lot in it, I'm going to be splitting this review into multiple sections, so it'll be easier for you guys to understand exactly what's going on. There's a reason I made this game its own review as opposed to rapid-firing it like the last one. So I hope you guys are excited, because it's time for us to begin The Legend of Mana. Now, I could not find any interviews about this game's development, but it seems that aside from the series creator Koichi Ishii, the team for this game was different from the team who worked on the previous games. Hiroki Kikuta had left Square to make his own company, so they got Yoko Shimomura as the composer this time, who is famous for working on the Kingdom Hearts franchise, Street Fighter II, and many of the Mario RPGs. You can really tell the developers wanted to try something different with this game. Where the previous Mana games were titled Seiken Densetsu 1, 2, and 3 in Japan, this game instead opted to be called Seiken Densetsu Legend of Mana. Huh. If I had to choose one central theme or idea behind this game, it would be imagination. The basic premise of the game is that 900 years ago, the Tree of Mana fell, and Mana with it. As the world fell into decay and ruin, you, an unexplained hero and silent protagonist, are tasked with resurrecting the world. How do you do this? Well, using artifacts. So as established earlier, this game has a bit of a unique structure. Instead of progressing through the game in a linear fashion, you essentially place the levels of the game in any order you want. At the start of the game, you are shown that each of the world's lands and memories were locked inside of these artifacts, and after choosing between a boy or a girl, you select an area on the world map where you want your adventure to take place. After this, you are given your first of many artifacts and placed down your home, officially beginning your adventure. After talking to this plant dude outside of your house, he gives you an artifact for the town of Domina, where the game begins to open up. There you can accept 2 different quests right from the get-go, both of which will reward you with different lands to explore. For my first quest, I found this young man named Elazul, who was looking for his girlfriend Pearl, which took me to the Makiv Caverns. However, you can choose to help out the traveling merchant Nicolo instead, which unlocks the Luan Highway. Each of these different quests will reward you with different artifacts, and from there you can actually progress through the game in a wide variety of ways. It's actually an interesting approach to an open structure given the limitations at the time, as most games these days with an open structure just dump you into this big environment and say go. This one allows you to do linear levels in a variety of orders, with many quests taking you back and forth across them. This of course does affect the storytelling, but I'll go into that in more detail later. For now, let's talk about the gameplay. To say this game is open-ended and call it a day would still not accurately describe how insanely complex this game actually is. During my first playthrough, every time I felt I'd seen everything this game had to offer, I would find out some other new mechanic in the game, and this would continue for the majority of my 30-hour playthrough. I feel the best way to start in describing this would be the combat. The game has separate heavy and light attack buttons, and, similar to Trials of Mana, this game features a special attack meter that gradually fills up as you do damage to enemies. Only in this game you are given 1 meter the whole game, which I'm not a fan of and wish there was a way to upgrade it. The game also features an ability system that actually expands and grows depending on what skills you use. From the start, you have abilities such as dashing towards and away from enemies, jumping, blocking, and many more. When you have 2 compatible skills equipped, they can actually be combined to give you a special action. Using the jump and crouch abilities will perform the high jump, the dash and push abilities will perform a tackle that sends enemies flying, and these are just a few examples. There are a ton of different abilities you can learn. What's neat is that after enough uses you can actually unlock these combined abilities as standalone selections that can then be combined with other moves. My only problem with this system is they only allow you to bring 2 at a time, which feels weirdly restrictive the farther you get into the game. Now, a bit of an odd change from the last few games is there are no restorative items. Occasionally enemies will drop healing items, but they only serve the purpose of healing you during that fight, and after every single fight you are fully healed. Additionally, upon dying you can choose to continue and immediately pick up right where you left off. However, to me personally, this makes combat feel much less punishing than it used to be, and so fights feel way too easy for my own liking. Now, probably one of my favorite changes to the combat is the magic. In the last few games, when you or an enemy cast a spell, the game would freeze for a moment to let the animation play out, and more often than not, it was not avoidable. However, in Legend of Mana, spells are casted in real time and display an AoE effect to let you know where it's going to hit. It's honestly pretty frickin' cool, and I'm happy they handled it this way. Now, in my opinion, one problem with magic in this game is there isn't really any MP, meaning you can just kind of fire out magic spells over and over and over again without really being punished. Now, with some tweaks, I think you could actually make this work quite a bit and make something really fun out of it. But as is, it's just another OP way of doing magic. Co-op is back in this game, however it is 2-player exclusive this time, which might be disappointing for some people. Unlike the previous games though, only the second player can control your party members, so you cannot freely switch like in Trials. After completing certain quests, you will also gain access to a monster farm, magic crafting, golem building, weapon and armor forging, and a tree that allows you to grow fruit which is used for various things across the game. Off topic, but in regards to the golems, my favorite part of the mechanic is that they have this AI component system that eerily reminds me of the Navi Customizer from Battle Network, which is pretty neat. Finding these new mechanics was honestly pretty fun and created a sensation of building up your arsenal and discovering more about the game. However, I think the game, very intentionally at points, is very bad at conveying how to even unlock these features. For example, in order to learn magic, you first have to, as I understand it, because there are a lot of moving pieces to this, so I might be wrong here, do this mission in the desert where you help this teacher and her kids get a book back from this other magic professor. And in order to recruit monsters, you have to stop these 2 little kids from causing havoc in the town of Domina, and then you have to return to the town to get a tutorial on how to catch the monsters. Learning to build golems requires you to do a small quest for this one dude in the junkyard, and in order to gain access to weapon and armor forging, you need to find Watts' hammer, and in order to access the tree, you need to meet Gaia and Luan Highway, who tells you about it, and the list really goes on from here. This game is very much built around you exploring and giving you features as you find them, which also very much opens up the possibility to spend the majority of a playthrough being unable to use magic, or really any of these features if you don't know how to look for them. Some quests even require you to have a monster or a golem to even progress, which could definitely lead you to look up a guide out of frustration. This game very much feels like an expansion of what they wanted to do with the 3 routes of Trials. I don't think any single player, unless you use a guide, will play this game the exact same way, as not only can you place your lands in a vast variety of orders, but quests, abilities, and weapon types the characters choose to use will all be incredibly different, adding an interesting layer of replayability to this game. I'd go into more detail about the other features, but I'd rather let you guys discover some of that for yourself, as I think finding these new mechanics and figuring out how they work is a big part of the experience with this game. Now, in regards to difficulty, the difficulty of the lands scale with your placement based on 2 factors: how close the land is to your home and when you placed it. On my first playthrough, I just placed my lands wherever I wanted, and while I had a challenging fight here or there, it was a breeze. On my second run, I chose to place my house in the corner of the map and proceeded to place combative lands farther away while I put the towns closer. As a result, I did have a harder time on my second playthrough, but unfortunately not by much. Upon finishing the game, you are able to play the game again in New Game Plus, carrying over all of the facilities you unlocked in your first playthrough alongside your weapon experience, levels, abilities, and little cactus entries, making it a bit easier to get things you missed the first time around. Also unlocked in New Game Plus is a book inside of your house that you can use to change the difficulty. Nightmare mode raises every enemy's level by 30, and No Future mode raises the enemy's level to 99, and from what I hear, this mode is insanely difficult and requires very efficient use of the weapon forge and knowledge of land placements to survive. So if you want a challenge, this is the way to go. I'm honestly really happy they implemented New Game Plus, and I think it adds a ton of replayability. While I have not tried it out yet, I do see myself going back to this game and trying to complete quests I missed and eventually attempting No Future mode. But now that we've talked about the gameplay, it's time for us to talk about the quests and the story. very common complaint from fans of Secret of Mana and Trials is that this game doesn't really have a central plotline, and on top of that, this game features a silent protagonist, unlike previous games that had main characters with set personalities and motivations. However, to say there's nothing to be gained narratively out of this is just not true, as this game has by far the richest characters established in the entire series up to this point. This game does its storytelling across various quests spread throughout the game that teach you little bits about the characters living in this world. A very good comparison I want to make here is to my favorite Zelda game of all time, Majora's Mask. Link in that game is a piece of wood and barely reacts to anything, and in terms of his motivations and the central plot, it's rather simple. But what makes that game so special is the characters surrounding the protagonist. It's about you, the player, getting attached to these characters and wanting to make their lives better in a time where so much is going wrong. Legend of Mana gives me a very similar feeling. Most quests are centered on small characters having to do things such as figuring out the origin of a ghost haunting the Coral Hotel, helping catch a giant gorilla in the fairy forest, hate this place, helping this professor put his brother's soul to rest, and helping Nicolo the merchant swindle his way into owning the entire city of Geo, and there are so many more examples. However, the game also features quest lines that span across multiple lands, containing their own story arcs, and this is where the story of this game really shines. First off, there's a Draconis story arc about where you help the Dragon Emperor Draconis and his bloody campaign to escape from the underworld and retake the world. There's the Fairy arc about a love story between a maiden and a demon, featuring a conflict between old friends torn apart by their ideals and views. And last but not least, the Jumi arc, a somewhat convoluted but tragic tale of a dying race of jewel people struggling to survive in the face of a jewel hunter who is more than what she seems. These quests alone did a great job for making up for the lack of a main story, and managed to make me laugh, get me excited, surprised me, and also made me tear up. Another part of this game is a little plant dude called Little Cactus. This guy hangs out in your room all day and seems unresponsive, but once you've completed a quest you can talk to him and he'll give a little quip and write in his diary once you leave the room. If you want every Little Cactus quest logged, you will have to remember to talk to him after every quest or you'll miss that entry. In all honesty, this is incredibly annoying and tedious, but I often found his remarks so quirky that I was able to overlook a bit of it. There is a quest that activates sometime after you recruit the Pumpkin Kids, where Little Cactus goes away for a bit, and when he returns he actually logs all of the quests you forgot to mention to him, which is actually really nice of the game to do. I used to have a Little Cactus. Now for the way the lands are structured, I'm going to have to get a bit more negative here. I hate the way most of these lands are laid out. The first time through I was able to ignore this since I was having so much fun with the writing, but it's gotta be said, these levels are just designed to get you lost. While the background and environments are very pretty and are excellent uses of the pre-rendered backgrounds that Square liked to do back then, many screens don't look distinct enough to really tell apart at points. The forest level in particular was just designed to get you lost, and I was running around in there for about an hour before I finally completed it, only for Little Cactus to taunt me afterwards.
Drink cactus juice. It'll quench you. Nothing's quenchier. It's the quenchiest.
Ironically, the lands that don't involve combat and exploration can be some of the most fun in the game in terms of writing. There's this really goofy quest where you help this one guy sell his girlfriend's lamps, but the problem is the citizens of the town are Dudbears and only speak in the Dudbear language. You talk to this bartender in the town who gives you a rundown of what each term is, and you are given one shot with each Dudbear to get this correct. So naturally, I wrote this down, and with the help of my friend Snive, who now has a PhD in Dudbear speak, we sold all of the lamps. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba.
Do ba ba? Do ba ba ba, do ba ba.
Do ba ba ba, do ba ba dub.
Dub da 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 do da. Gak do ba 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 ba.
Hey guys, what's going on? What you talking about?
Do ba ba boo dub dub.
No?
Gak!
What did I say?
Now, in regards to the three main quest lines, the easiest one to keep up with and complete was the Draconis quest line, as the lands involved with that quest line could only be obtained in this route, meaning you don't have to do much backtracking. However, the other quest lines are a little more obtuse. For the Fairy and Jumi quest lines, many events took place in levels I had already previously visited, meaning I had to backtrack to levels and assume that maybe new quests would be available. The most guilty of this was by far the Jumi quest line, which also happened to be far longer than the other quests, sending you back and forth from your house, Domina Village, Geo, Coaster Resort, the mines, and the tower, before finally giving you the final level. I will reiterate that all of these places will almost certainly be places you've been to before, and so I very much had to use a guide to know where the heck I was going at points. Though I feel in terms of writing, the Fairy and Jumi quests are much more complex in their themes and world building than the Draconis are. The Fairy storyline has good and bad elements, but overall I found the world building and story kind of fascinating. The game also makes the fairies the bad guys, which I'm not used to seeing these days in RPGs, and I found that kind of interesting. That is, until I saw this happen. This guy's named Escad, and from first glance you'd think it would be cool, but he is kind of a violent brute who hates this demon dude with a passion, and the fairies who work for him by extension. What I liked and disliked about this route is there's a whole lot of gray in who exactly is in the right here. Well, aside from the demon dude, who is definitely the bad guy. Yet the game makes you choose sides on many occasions, and I found that kind of neat. But I would always choose Dana over Escad because of what I mentioned before. I found the Jumi storyline has a lot of lore to it that is not delivered in the best ways, and it can honestly be kind of hard to follow towards the end, but I love the ending of the Jumi arc, featuring some of the most beautiful music I've heard in the whole series. Ironically, I would say my only criticism of this game's structure is that the true ending is kinda anticlimactic. The final dungeon is incredibly short and can be unlocked early in the game if you do the right side quests. But since there is not much actual story build-up compared to the side routes, it doesn't hold as much impact as you'd think the ending to a game would. As I thought I was only around a quarter through the dungeon, only to find myself suddenly in the fight, it was pretty odd. However, I'm a big fan of how the final level's theme is the same as the game's title theme, and makes the short time I spent in it feel incredibly epic. But on that topic, it's finally time I talk about the girl herself. Now this is going to seem really silly, but the music was one area of the game I was a little bit more skeptical about going in, as I am very familiar with Yoko Shimomura's work from the Kingdom Hearts series, and while she can make upbeat tracks, I wasn't convinced her typically dark music would fit well with this series' tone. But I'm glad to say I was wrong. Yoko Shimomura did an amazing job with this OST, and in fact, I'd say this is my favorite soundtrack from her. As one of the few interviews I could find, Shimomura has said that this was the soundtrack where she got to express herself the best, and is her favorite soundtrack to date. I knew I was in for something good when I stepped into my first level and I heard this start to play. I think my favorite part of this soundtrack was how there were specific theme songs for each of the three routes, permeating all the way into their climaxes and final levels. I will say though that the implementation of the music is not always the best. The game is around 25 hours and loves to use certain tracks a lot more than others. And given that you'll be in some levels for over an hour, even songs like Earth Painting that managed to make me really excited the first time around got really tiring to listen to after a while. The music in this game is really something beautiful. While I still prefer Kakuta, I think Shimomura more than impressed me here. She really did an excellent job with this game, and I really could not imagine this game without her soundtrack accompanying it. Now that all is said and done, what do I think of Legend of Mana? Well, on the one hand, the game has an insane amount of depth and complexity, creating a game that is very replayable, but the game also has a lot of frustrating elements. But despite that, I was in love with the characters, music, and presentation. Those elements, paired with the sensation of constantly finding out new things about the game, really elevated it to me, and upon finishing my first playthrough, I liked this game quite a bit more than Secret of Mana. But during my second playthrough, I definitely noticed the cracks. I think it is right behind Secret of Mana for me, because while Secret is grindy and clunky, Legend is just as clunky in certain areas, and I'm not a fan of how the levels themselves are structured. But by far, my favorite part of this game was the writing. Again, I see so many people talk about how this game is not as well written as the previous ones, and while I do think that it lacks a central focused story, I really could not disagree more. At this game's highs, it is something far above anything I'd ever seen from Mana before, and I really absolutely love it. Even though this game has its lows, I really had a lot of fun going through all of these 3 quest lines, and even some of the smaller quest lines that gave me a lot of laughs. I'm not sure if I did a great job selling you on this game because it's kind of an odd one to recommend, especially since this game hasn't been re-released since the PS3. Still, if you can manage to get a hold of this game, I think it is definitely worth a play. On the PS3 store it is $6, but here's hoping it arrives on another Mana collection or something. If you do decide to play it, maybe you'll be like me and find that this game you ignored all these years due to hearsay was actually legendary. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed the review. The next review is going to be Sword of Mana for the Game Boy Advance, and hoo boy, I have a whole lot to say about this one. But I'm going to take a break first because I spent quite a while already on Legend of Mana. I spent 2 different playthroughs within the last month playing that game, and I just need a break from playing these old Mana games. I hope you guys understand. If you guys want something to kill the time though, before the next review comes out, I'm currently doing a Let's Play of Trials of Mana for the PS4 right here, and you guys can go ahead and check that out. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I hope to review that one eventually as well. And if you guys do want to catch the next review, feel free to hit that subscribe button down below with the bell icon. You guys know how it is, it's YouTube. But seriously, go ahead and do that so you can stay updated for when this review does eventually come out. But anyways, seriously, thank you guys so much for watching this review. I'll see you later, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!